Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Obviously, most of you watching probably know that LSD can take you through some pretty hectic and full-on experiences. But what for me makes psychedelics so interesting is when many people are having the same full-on, weird, wacky experiences, because they stop being this like random phenomenon that's just like, yep, that's drugs just fucking up your brain, putting you into a chaotic state. All of a sudden, what it invokes is a sense of new order, a new or a separate reality to our own, or a different wavelength of perception that is just as ordered as the wavelength we all exist on when we're sober. And that's why I love dissecting different psychedelic experiences. You know, I did it with the Truman Show effect once before, and today what I want to be talking about is telepathy on acid. Definitely before I ever took psychedelics, I never gave any sort of credence to telepathy whatsoever. Even after taking psychedelics, even after having the experience itself, I still have had to kind of justify it in a way that makes sense to me. So obviously everything I'm going to be talking about in this video is just my theory, keep that in mind, but I'll be talking about how I've experienced telepathy on acid and basically why I think I've experienced this. So for me, when I first experienced telepathy, it occurred in a really subtle way. It definitely does get to become like more extreme and the more like classical telepathy that you imagine. But when I first went through it, the way I experienced it was I was actually, you know, with my friend, we were in a car, and while I was just chilling in the passenger seat, I had a very high dose of acid, and so my thoughts were becoming like kind of worried and things like this. And so I would have a thought, let's say like, oh no, you know, this acid's coming on stronger than I was expecting. And then my friend would seemingly reply and comment on my thoughts. He would say, you know, something along the lines of, just calm down, don't worry, everything's gonna be fine. And it was subtle things like this. I'd make a joke inside my mind, or something would happen and I would feel like laughing, and my friend would laugh for me. He would be seemingly reacting to my internal thoughts and stuff like that. Now, this I was expecting to be the sort of telepathy that people were having, because it's really like pretty chill level. It could easily be explained away as, you know, people being more self-involved when they're on psychedelics, and so they're just picking up on things or interpreting things in a different way. But when I looked online, I was seeing tons and tons and tons of posts about people not just saying they've experienced telepathy on acid, but saying that they've experienced it to the degree where they can feel like they're having a direct psychic conversation with people around them. Now, straight away, I need to clarify, this isn't a conversation you're having with a friend. When it happened to me, I wasn't just chilling with my mate and all of a sudden we're talking about events that happened to him when he was a young boy, because I'm getting access to his mind and to his personality, things like this. The identity of the individuals who I'm having a telepathic relationship with is replaced by something entirely different. It's actually, in my experience, a hive mind intelligence, which seems to be linked with anybody else around you. All these individuals seem to share the same message as well, which for me has changed my life entirely, but I'll touch on what that message is later on in the video. If you're new to psychedelics or you haven't had this experience, this probably all sounds freaking insane, so let me clarify and explain why I think this is possible. The most relatable way to refer to psychedelics is like kind of what's happening inside here. And I did Google, you know, what happens when we take acid, and the thing that I found that could like explain the psychedelic phenomenon, or the telepathic phenomenon, sorry, the best, was the fact that apparently something called the posterior cingulate cortex, I'll call it PCC for short, apparently that is responsible for our sense of self, or is theorized to be responsible for our sense of self. And when we take acid, information is allowed to pass through the thalamus, which is, I read, the neural gatekeeper. It prevents information from accessing, you know, certain parts of the brain. Well, acid allows information to pass through it into the PCC. It overstimulates the PCC so much that your sense of self begins to dissolve. I remember reading a study on this, and you know, one of the people conducting the experiment, they said that this could account for why, when we are having a conversation with another person on acid, that the boundary of self dissolves, or the border that defines the self dissolves, and you begin to merge and blend with people around you. That was kind of the quote from the study, and they didn't really explain how this blending or merging with other people takes place. internally or experientially. But I remember reading that and thinking this could be what is responsible for us having this telepathic connection with another individual. Testing. I know I look a little bit different right now. The recording just kind of fucked up a bit, so we're redoing it. But what I wanted to say is, what I think is happening is that basically when we are sober, our PCC isn't being overstimulated, and therefore we are projecting a reality that reinforces a sense of self. However, when we take a high dose of LSD and then we do overstimulate this PCC, obviously this sense of self dissolves. And what happens is we begin to unify with everybody around us. And of course, if you're uniting and unifying with people around you, then it becomes harder for you to define, the difference between you and another person, and therefore you have no clear sense of self anymore. So that's why that happens. Now, with that in mind, it's important to note that it's a very popular belief in the scientific community that to a large degree, we actually invent our experience of the outside world. I've talked about this in other videos, so I'm not going to go into deep detail right now about it. But basically, you're interpreting your world through, or the outside world through subjective senses. And then, let's say if you're encountering another person, these subjective senses you then interpret with your psyche in a subjective way. And, you apply meaning and you apply reasons for a person's behavior, and you form an identity around this person. But ultimately, this feeling of a soul and this feeling of an identity is something that you've composed and something you've created. And in other words, you're essentially experiencing yourself. And I actually think that our subconscious mind imbues itself with our experience of the outside world and actually kind of imbues itself with other people, seeing as we seem to not consciously create these things. And I can never be 100% sure what motivates the narrative behind our experience of the outside world. When I say narrative, I mean like the context we give to our experience of everything we encounter. But I think that this narrative is actually a reflection of what's happening inside our brain's chemistry, which may sound a little bit weird, but I'll explain that in a second. One of the things I found that LSD actually does is it allows for communication in new parts of the brain, or between new parts of the brain. So basically, activity occurs where activity previously didn't before you took LSD inside the mind. And I could imagine that our subconscious actually resides in these parts, which previously weren't being stimulated in the way they were, or directly stimulated like they are when you take LSD. If you're suddenly getting some sort of direct access and direct connection with the subconscious mind, this then has to be reflected in your experience of the outside world, because that's what the outside world is. It's a reflection of what's happening inside here. So we experience telepathy with other individuals because we're having a direct connection with a thing that represents the subconscious mind, i.e. another person. This also serves to make it far more difficult for you to define yourself clearly, because now you have this non-physical connection with another person. So where do you begin? Where do you end? You are merging with another individual. So it serves two purposes. One, it makes it harder for you to define the sense of self. And this plays into the fact that your PCC is being overstimulated. But it also shows you having a direct connection with something that represents your subconscious mind, which, would make sense as you are also getting access to new parts of the brain when you take LSD. All these things are coming together and being orchestrated in your experience of the outside world. Obviously, this explains why you have access to the minds of other people through some kind of telepathic connection, because on some level, all of these people exist inside your mind. And this to me explains so much, because one of the things that is being, or one of the messages that they actually share, other people share with you when you're in this state, when you're in the really complete telepathic or like unified state of consciousness, is that they are me and I am them. We are one. Which makes a lot of sense if they are what you have invented. They are you. They are your subconscious mind. And you are them. You created them. I could imagine a lot of people would want to reject this, even if they experienced it themselves, because it kind of has scary connotations. But trust me, when you're there, it's the exact opposite of scary. For me, it was just so beautiful and so liberating when I was, having my complete telepathic experiences. And one of the reasons is because, yes, one of their messages was that we are all one. But another one of their messages was that we don't need to live in fear of other people's judgments. And I promise you that is one of the messages that I was like telepathically receiving, because it sounds really cliche when I share it. But when you're there, it just makes so much sense. And it makes your sober reality, the reality where you identify with yourself, seem like a joke. Because in this reality, we are so frightened of other people's judgments. We're really afraid to just act on our impulses and our ambitions, just any of our real, true, deep heart desires, because we're afraid of how other people will receive it, how other people will take it. And the last thing we want is to express ourselves authentically in case we are rejected. Then how can we accept this authentic part of ourselves when no one else can? But it's just stupid because we're all manifesting a reality of fear, of inhibition. The world you know, the world you experience, you've invented. And the degree to which you're hallucinating it, you can't freaking imagine. I mean, I'm sure there's many of you who have done a high dose of LSD and you've seen just how, or DMT or something like that, and you've seen just how different reality can be as soon as you just alter some chemistry in your brain. How different your experience of the outside world becomes. I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm getting too passionate or like going on a tangent, but it's just because it is such a cliche message. It is really hard to like get across how genuine it is and how actually potentially life-changing it can be if it's properly integrated. I'm definitely still integrating it, 100%, but I know it's a beautiful message, and I know if I do accept it, it will allow me to become my true self and to discover who I really am. Because you can't otherwise. If you're living in fear of other people's judgments, you'll never be able to find out who you really are. You have nothing to fear. If another person rejects you, it's just an aspect of your subconscious rejecting yourself. That's basically the message there. I'm going to leave it there anyway, guys. I'd like to thank all the patrons on the page right here. You guys, absolute G's. Thank you so much for freaking helping this channel, especially when I haven't been uploading a lot recently. I do want to change that. I say that a lot, but I do really mean it. Just seems like things come up and get in the way, but I do want to make TripWhip a priority. So thank you guys for sticking with me. I absolutely want to make it your worthwhile. I've been doing stuff like I've got an idea to start making a film about psychedelics. I'd definitely find a way to get you patrons involved with that as well. But yeah, we'll figure it all out. Hope you're all having a great day. If not, make it a great day. And I'll see you all soon. Peace.